What is up, guys? Welcome back to the TNT Business Podcast. I'm your host, KT Temple, and on location today, we have Mr. Ken Temple. Where are you at today, bro?
I'm actually the traveling reporter today. I'm at my favorite hangout spot in all of Mooresville. I'm at Hoptown Brewing.
Yeah. So, and who do you have there with you at a Hoptown?
Well, I mean, how many ways can I introduce him? I mean, I could say one of the bestest friends I've ever had in my whole life. My travel partner. Well, I shouldn't say that. Not just me and you. But yeah,
true,
there's more of us than just me and him. But yeah, we've traveled the world together. But I like to say that I own a brewery. In reality, I own about 2 bar stools worth of a brewery. That was Scott's idea, his vision, and he's the actual one that. You know what I should say is I should say that I'm an investor, because just like I'm an investor in Coke, they don't ask my opinion about anything, and neither does Scott.
He's being very modest. I checked through the list of people that said yes, and if we hadn't gotten to Kent and some other friends, saying yes, then we probably, wouldn't be sitting here today. So he's being very modest, but he was integral in the decision to open this brewery.
Yeah, so we got Scott Plemmons on here, who they are at Hoptown Brewing. They're based in Mooresville, North Carolina, and we're just going to talk to Scott about his business and everything he's been doing to make this happen. Before we get to that, I do want to thank our sponsor, the Temple Team. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, you can find us at thetempleteam.com. We've got agents from Statesville all the way down to Fort Mill, and even if you're looking somewhere else, reach out to us. We'll get you connected with a top realtor no matter where you're looking for. So again, if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, you can find us at thetempleteam.com. So where do we want to start?
Well, I think just Scott has a pretty cool story because, believe it or not, he had a life before he decided to make beer, and it was a pretty interesting one. So, Scott, just kind of take us through, the career and really the early retirement you got that made you so bored that you started a brewery.
Well, thanks for that, Kent. Yeah. I did. I spent 30 years in retail. I worked for Lowe's Home Improvement. Many of you, out there, of course, are familiar with Lowe's, have one somewhere in your community. But I started back in 1978, did a couple of years part-time, and then became a full-time employee in 1980 and continued to work through college, went to Appalachian State University, graduated 84. But through that period of time, Lowe's kept me on as an employee because it was easier to keep me on as an employee than to release me and rehire me every summer. So I was fortunate, as it turned out, to remain an employee through that early part of my career. But I spent, half of my career, 15 years in store operations. I worked in the stores for that 15 years as either a store manager, a district manager, or at one point early on, sweeping floors. That was the first job they give you, is they put a broom in your hand and you learn how to sweep, and you got to do it right. So had the opportunity to work for some great people. I'm a second gen Lowe's guy. My father was at Lowe's back in 1955 through 1975, and then I started in 78. So we had a 3-year gap between 55 and 2009 that neither one of us were working at Lowe's. So as I kind of settled in the Mooresville area, and Kent, bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold, I said, hey, these people must be pretty good. Maybe I'll work through the Temple Team when it comes time to find a property. But we have done a lot of business together as friends, and we've always been very, very pleased with what the Temple Team has done for us, just to put a little plug in there. But ended up in Mooresville because Lowe's corporate office settled in Mooresville, and we were one of the first 100 employees that moved to the area. So I was fortunate to not have to drive very far, after living in Winston before that and commuting up to North Wilkesboro. But just it's kind of enough about the business career. But
one more. So your last title there was?
I was Senior Vice President of Store Operations.
All right, so he told me this one time, KT, and I was like, okay, so tell me, you're a VP over what? Like, you got hammers or something? And he says, Kent, actually what I'm over is all the stuff that they don't know where to put, like gift cards. And I just remember him telling me that. I was like, he was like we don't know where to do with that. He was kind of like, give it to Mikey, he'll eat it.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't know where to put that product. Give it to Scott. He'll know what to do, because Well, he grew up there. I mean, you probably know where all the bodies are hidden.
I
too.
absolutely do, and I think one thing that was transferable from my career into opening a brewery was just the business acumen that I picked up over the years of working for great people. And I had an area, it was called the specialty sales area, was kind of a area within the company that did wear a lot of hats. We had the commercial sales department, we had installed sales, special order sales. I ran Lowe's.com for a while when it was just coming out of the ground, and back during the big debate of whether a commerce site should be informational or transactional. And we had a lot of infighting, to say the least, of which direction we were heading. And now I think Lowe's is doing several $1 billion a year online. So the transactional side of it, won out in the end. But just all the experiences of being an operator and, working in a store with 300 employees, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about HR, and that becomes your primary job, is dealing with people. And, not all 300 get along at the same time or remain in the company that long. So that was a big learning for me. And that transferred well, I think, into retail at Hoptown, and being able to open up a business. And my wife, by the way, Sandy, who's not here on the video today, she was also at Lowe's. We met at Lowe's. And she had a marketing background. So the two of us together, I think made a good team in terms of opening and understanding what each other's responsibilities were with the business. She stayed in her lanes, I stayed in my lanes, and it worked out pretty well. Kent says he doesn't have a voice, but I listen to every investor, and we have several investors. Many of them, as I said, are friends. And they always say, don't do business with friends and family. Well, I did business with friends and family, and it's worked out.
So far,
so far it's worked out. Yeah.
KT, we shouldn't tell him that we've had Sandy on the podcast 3 times already.
I don't want to hurt his feelings.
She's a smart one of the team. She's a smart one.
So yeah. Scott, you retire, and I know you were doing what all VPs do. You're consulting,
right?
You run that business.
Yeah.
And then, as I remember it, you started making beer in like the closet first.
Yeah.
Right. So just tell us about the closet and then going back to college, and give them that little story.
Sure. Well, a lot of breweries start with home brewing, and home brewing is essentially just that. You buy a nice kit, you buy prepackaged beer ingredients, and you go into your kitchen. Some people may have a workshop. And it's a pretty easy process to brew beer. It's a hard process to make it taste good, because there's a lot of steps.
That's
in the
kind
middle.
of important.
Yeah, a lot of steps in the middle where things could go wrong. In fact, the very first batch of beer that I brewed it with my wife Sandy. She bought me a beer making kit while we were dating, and she thought it would be cool because I was really into craft beer. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of craft beer, back in 20 years ago, 18, 20 years ago. So you had to search out good craft beer. So she bought me this kit, and we made a batch together, made a couple of mistakes, bottled it up, put it in dry storage for a while, let it ferment, opened it up, and it tasted terrible. It was horrible. So lost interest in brewing, and went on about other things, got rid of all the beer, got rid of most of the homebrew kit that I had accumulated. And then we were at a friend's house 2 years later up in the mountains, and Jack was a home brewer, and he brewed this Christmas ale, and it was really good. And I'm like, God, I need to get back into this. I need to give it another shot. So we'd moved in the meantime. So I found pieces and parts of the kit, finished it out with the beer supply store here, made our next batch, and it was an amber ale, and it really tasted good. And got a lot of positive feedback on people that I gave it to, and hopefully they were honest with me. So you kind of progress from home brewing in the kitchen to the next step, which is called all grain brewing. And all grain brewing is that you're taking raw ingredients and you're combining them, which is primarily malt, water, yeast, and hops. And those are the 4 main ingredients. And you're making a beer kind of the way a big brewery would make it. Got into that, and I remember my first batch I made. I was so excited because I did a knockoff of a beer called Hop, Drop, and Roll, which is a brewery in Charlotte, No Die Brewing. So I thought it tasted just like it. So I was so excited, I just filled a red Solo cup. I put it in my car, And I drove it to the beer supply store, and this guy, Larry, who's no longer living, but he was like my mentor through the homebrew process. I said, "You try this. What do you think? What do you think?" He's like, "Man, this is really good. I think you're onto something." So my first, transportation of alcohol was illegal, right? Because I had an open container in my car, but I did not drink from it. Rushed it to Larry anyway. So he helped me along the way through this, all grain process, and through these periods of good batch, bad batch, good batch, bad batch, I learned a lot about it and started producing beer for distribution. And distribution at that time, my wife Sandy had a yoga studio that she had opened, and she was putting the beer on tap at her yoga studio. She had a nice little bar set up with wine and kombucha and coffee, lattes, that kind of thing. Well, the name that we selected at the time was Hootenanny Brewing, because Hootenanny had ties back to Lowe's, my career. And Hootenanny used to be these fabulous parties that Lowe's would throw back in the 70s and 80s. And so I liked that name. It was kind of catchy. People liked it. So that was the first name for my brewery, was Hootenanny. So she was selling Hootenanny beer. And then I took it to some other places around town, and people are like, "Yeah, this is pretty good. I'll buy a keg. I'll buy a keg." So I started getting attention through the local community and did some what's called tap takeovers, is when you go into a bar, like a Lowe's Foods or a local bar, and they buy 5 or 6 kegs from you. They put it on tap, and a bunch of people come and support you, which was always the hope, right? And it did work out that way, enough to where people kept saying, "You need to open a real brewery where we can come sit down at a bar." And that's when the process really began for Hoptown Brewing.
Now, hold on, time out.
Yeah.
Have you been to college yet?
Oh yeah. Well, I went to App, and part of the experience of learning fermentation was going back to Boone. So when I was in Boone, Boone was dry. Now, this was late 70s, early 80s.
His baby pictures are in black and white.
Man.
Yeah, you could not buy booze in Boone. So we'd have to drive 8 miles to Blowing Rock. A lot of people watching can relate to that probably. So I went back to school. This was probably like 2015 up at App State. Of course, they passed liquor by the drink. There were breweries up there. And I went to this week-long course called Fermentation Science, where every morning you would go into class and they'd have beer sitting in front of you. I'm like, wow, this is kind of interesting. You had to smuggle it in back in the 80s. And now I got people presenting beer at 7:30 in the morning. The reason we did that, they would taint the beer with all flavors, and part of the exercise in going to class was learning what was creating an off flavor. And there's a lot of chemistry involved in that, which I won't get into. But so I did go back to school for a week, got a little diploma.
All right, so you did that, and then the other thing, before you get too far into Hoptown,
Yeah.
So Scott has a really cool farmhouse, nice little piece of property, and he put in a pool and what looks like a pool house. And today it is actually a pool house.
Yeah.
But in the time, he actually built the craziest brewery in his pool house. I mean, it's not, if you go to a brewery, it's not that size, but what are they, a quarter of the size of those? I mean, they're just taller than me.
This was the size of your kitchen. If you have a small kitchen. I mean,
But the outside, I'm serious. It looks
the
like
pool
it's,
house
it looks
itself
like this
was-
pool house. And then you go in, and he's got this whole brewery set up. We all just thought, well, this is the coolest thing ever, because at that time, that's when he was doing a keg here, a keg there. He would go to festivals, be the first one to sell out every single time. To me, that was the clue to, okay, maybe we do need to open this. I remember every time we'd go somewhere, you'd be packing up, and you'd be halfway through the day.
Well, it helped to have, in a community where I've spent now almost 30 years, I know a lot of people, and people would come and support the brewery. And we, at the time, the beer was good, and people were, because it was as local as you can get. Craft brewing has always been a local experience, and the more local you can make it, the more people are engaged. And so it was, everybody knew the story, because there have been, fortunately, some articles in local papers, magazines written about us. So people were coming out because this guy brews in his garage. I mean, that was the story. This guy brews in his garage, or he brews his beer in his kitchen. They didn't know the real story, which was a little nicer than that, but it was 1,000 square foot building total. And within that, I'd carved out a corner and put what became a commercial brewery. So I had my ABC permit, and I had the license to make and distribute beer on our property, which you probably wouldn't find that in the state of North Carolina. All the conditions had to be met. Certain feet off the property line. It had to be climate controlled building. It had to be outside the city limits, so had to meet a lot of conditions. And one day I'll never forget. It's kind of a funny story. I'm walking out of the brewery, and this SUV comes driving down the driveway, and I'm like, oh crap! Well, what have I gotten myself into? Well, the guy gets out, and he's wearing plain clothes, but he's got a badge around it on his belt. And I said, can I help you? He said, yeah. Are you Hootenanny Brewing Company? I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, I'm here to do an unannounced inspection on your brewery. I think he thought I was running like either a meth lab or moonshine still in this building, right? Because he saw it as too small to be a brewery. So he's got a dog. I can hear the dog just barking, a police dog in the back of the vehicle. So he comes in, he walks around, he gives me a quick inspection. He says, man, you're good here. Good luck, with your business. And that was the end of it. Never had another visit to the property, but it was a little scary because you can always expect to have ABC come in, to your business. And that was my one and done with ABC.
All right. So here we go. Now tell us about this place I'm sitting in right now.
All right. So we're in Hoptown, as Kent mentioned. Hoptown, honestly, wouldn't exist had it not been for the real estate. The building that we're in was a 3,000 square foot outdoor clothing store that would be probably better suited in the mountains of Asheville, Boone, somewhere like that. But the people that opened this, the father of the son who ran the business and I were both executives at Lowe's. So when I'd come in all the time, I'd try to support him. I'd buy shoes and, they had real high end like clothing for outdoors. Try to support him as much as I could. So we became friends. I'm like, he had a coffee shop in here. It was a really cool vibe. I said, why don't you let me put some taps in here? And when people come back from, their hike or bike ride and they're sharing their experiences, they can have a beer and sit down on these leather couches he had. Everybody's probably been in a place like that. So it was really, really cool spot. Well, maybe. And eventually, one day I came in and said, have you thought any more about it? He said, well, I need to tell you a secret. You need to keep it between us, but I'm closing the business. I'm like, oh no, you're closing the business. What's going on? He said, look, people just aren't willing to buy, high level clothing like this in Mooresville, this part of Mooresville in particular. So I said, okay, well, would you mind if I talk to your dad about the building? He said, no, please do. And said, in fact, if you get something worked out with my dad, I'd love to be part of the new business because we just love this building so much. I said, okay. So I talked to Bill. I won't mention last names. I talked to Bill, and he was a real estate guy at Lowe's, and built this building himself, for his son for this business. And he said, look, we love the building. How about a lease? I said, well, all right. I really prefer to buy it, but let's, what are you thinking? He said, well, the square footage in this area, is such and such, and it'll be this much. I'm like, okay, because that's like my first foray into like commercial real estate square foot pricing, which I learned a lot about. But then he said, what do you need to do to upfit it? I said, well, we need to tear out this wall. We need to put in a brew house, which is 1,000 square feet. We need to put in an outdoor patio. So we got to put in a garage door. We got to put a shade structure cover over. And he's like, look, all right, let me think about it. And then a day or two passed, and he called me back and said, look, I want to sell you the building. He said, I can't let you convert this into a brewery as a lease. And then if you didn't make it, what am I going to do with the building as a brewery? So we agreed on the price, kind of tossed it out, to the group of investors. And fortunately, we ended up buying the building. So we're debt free, but we are all investors in a really good piece of real estate that we think is appreciated a lot, and one day maybe we'll find out. We don't know, what the future is, but, for now, we're definitely very motivated to keep this business operating the way it is. We have built a very successful business here because of the location and because of the beer and the staff. And one rule we have every time we talk about it in a staff meeting is the building's got to be grand opening ready every day, which is something I learned at Lowe's. If you start letting dust pile up in the corner, over time people don't see the dust anymore, and it builds and builds and builds, and your bathrooms are dirty and your beer lines are dirty, so you just can't let your business go that way.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've talked about on here is Gary Keller always says, invest in what you know. And so whenever I'm talking to groups, I'll say everything that I've invested in is real estate involved. Mm-hmm. And then I'll say, and I'm an owner in this brewery. And they go, well, how's that real estate involved? I said, we own the real estate. And you bought that what year?
Yeah.
Did you buy?
2019,
Wow.
we closed on the property.
2019.
7 years ago.
Wonder
Yeah.
what real estate has done since 2019. Well, I know in homes in the last 5 years, values are up 70.3%. But
Wow.
you know,
Unbelievable. Yeah.
isn't that cool? Then the other thing that I like about here that I want to mention before we kind of turn into a couple topics we'll talk about. So, how many beers you on tap?
We have 18 beers on
18
tap.
beers. And how many of them did you make?
18 beers.
Yeah.
We make
I mean,
everything here.
That's
yes.
to me, that's just incredible. The fact that this is all their products all day, every day.
Yeah, we went through a period after we opened where we were literally drinking from a fire hose, and a former brewer we had just couldn't see how to keep up, and we were bringing in other people's beers kind of under the name Guest Tap. Hated to do it, but they wanted beer, and we were bringing in some pretty well-known beers. So we would supplement we got to probably 50-50 at one point. But for the last now 4 years, we've been at 18 beers with 3 or 4 beers waiting in the wings to put on tap. So we're definitely in a much better place. And we're adding more and more outside accounts. We're at about 120 accounts outside of the brewery that we're servicing as well. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And you did get a little lucky. You know, you kind of had a grand opening date that would have pretty much coincided with us being in the middle of terrible COVID.
Oh, yeah.
But all your equipment got delayed getting here because of COVID. And then you kind of opened up right when people were just so ready.
Oh,
to get out.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was, we had a occupancy of 50% when we first opened back in 2021 in March. And then that went to 75 and 100. I know many of y'all remember that phase. And then the mask came off, and against point, people were dying to get out, and we couldn't keep up. Literally, it's, not the brewer's fault completely. I mean, we just could not keep up. We were doing just so much beer, and and we at the time we had wine, we had cider, we had seltzer, prosecco. We do mimosas. And I don't know if we talk about kind of the transition in a minute.
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
kind of what keeps the business moving forward.
And one just crazy rule that the state had, or I don't know, the state or national. So if you were in Hoptown, you could only have 50% occupancy, and if you were sitting down, you could take your mask off.
Yeah.
But if you stood up in the same spot, you had to put your mask on. It was like, okay, well, we have some sort of rules here.
Yeah, it's where COVID flies. Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the business part of this. Scott, over the last couple of years, and I get to see the Hoptown financials, and I know that I've seen your business continues to grow year over year. But man, I'm reading the news too. In 2025, more breweries went out of business than opened up. First net decline in a couple decades.
Right.
You got that going on. You've got a lot of people in KT's generation. They took the dry January, and they just kind of went dry all the time. You hear a lot of people talk about California sober, which means they're just doing weed.
Sunday sober.
Not alcohol.
A lot of things, yeah.
There's two things here. So what are you doing to make up for people drinking less beer and more other stuff, or people not drinking alcohol?
Yeah.
How do we keep this place full, which it is?
Sure. Well, another law or something that happened as a result of COVID, there were a couple of things, but one was an extension of premise, which meant you could take your occupancy that you had for your business and move it outside. So people you remember restaurants that were back in 2021 that were adding sidewalk seating. And so we were able to do that. We could encroach into our parking lot. And by doing that, we could social distance a lot better. And, we could seat more people at the brewery by doing that expansion of premise. The other thing this is a Governor Cooper thing that got passed was allowing breweries that do not have a kitchen to get a liquor license. And that was huge because before this law passed 2.5 years ago, a brewery without a on-site kitchen, food trucks excluded, could not sell liquor. They passed this because they realized that, and it was a bit of a loophole, and it was a bit of the Farm Bill loophole that's also now, playing heavily into THC and CBD products, but a small, like law that was really became very big for breweries was that we could now get a permit for liquor without having a kitchen. So now, and breweries were on the fence. I'm a purist. I want to have beer only, and okay, I'll do wine and cider and those things, but I really want to have beer only and not bring in liquor. Well, over time, breweries have added and added and added liquor. And so we now have a fairly significant percentage of our business on the liquor side. However, it's really worked well for us, back to Kent's point about keeping people in the seat. Number one, back to the whole location discussion. And I know that's cliche, right, for real estate, but location. So we have a great location here, and you have to pass by it to get home from a number of different places. We've always got something going on. We've always got a food truck. We've got live music. We have bingo and trivia and bunco and cycle club and a bike club. So we've always got an activity every day of the week to draw somebody to the brewery. But we realize if someone didn't like beer and they're getting drugged to a brewery, or maybe they're not, maybe they're getting drugged to a bar that sells beer and liquor, that we're missing out on that. So we very strategically added cocktails along the way to help our staff transition to that, and our customer, making sure we got the right mix. So now on a given day, we might sell, beer is still significant. We might sell 15% of our business in a mixed drink versus virtually not having anything at all. That frees up a lot of that beer for distribution. So that's where it comes into play, where we can now, we look at allocations and we say, okay, beer is 66% of our business, and cocktails are this, and wine is this, and cider is this. NA beverages, which we do sell THC products now.
You got THC, you got non-alcoholic THC,
Yep.
you got a little of everything.
Everybody's jumping in
Right.
that space. So our mix is definitely changing over the last 2 years, and that's what's keeping customers coming in. We do offer a lot of variety and high quality beverages, and
So I know you know this because you listen to our podcast every week, and as you know, KT and I are predicting an AI bubble, but not the one a lot of people are thinking. We're just saying that there's all these companies out there that are building AI. They're not all going to survive. In other words, there's just too many of them. Is that what happened in the craft brewery? They just opened up too many. So the bubble we're seeing is just too many, and so not all are going to survive. Just the best.
That's a good question. I think it's the boom that occurred 20 years ago in our industry. You couldn't mess up. You open a brewery, you're going to be successful unless you have really bad beer. But assuming it was good beer, there was just so much demand for beer, and people wanted to walk to a local brewery. They wanted to, it was just the cool place to hang out, and everybody was drinking beer. And then with, the introduction of all the craft beer, the IPAs and, different flavored beers, obviously really, really took off. But we hit a point of market saturation. And the biggest thing, back to a real estate, discussion, is that breweries entered into these leases that were, if you think about timing, that were, 8, 10, 15-year leases. And as the business, kind of contracted, their lease payments kept going up. And the biggest issue for breweries going out of business, quite frankly, and I know it's in our area as well, it's everywhere, is not being able to afford the new lease because the landlord has found somebody that will pay more. And they renegotiate, and I can name a half a dozen that are within 100 miles of where we're sitting that went out of business because they lost their lease, couldn't afford it anymore. So there's a common thing. But then, KT, your generation, and Kent mentioned it earlier, and younger and even older, right, are transitioning. Either they abstinence, they decided they're just not going to drink anymore, or they're doing some other product like a THC, CBD. They're drinking cocktails that are ready mix. So think of a High Noon, think of other low calorie, gluten free, low ABV, flavorful drinks that you can drink 3 or 4 or 5 of them in a night and not worry about getting home. And that's where a lot of the market has shifted. So we've added a lot of those products in our mix. But if you're leveraged already and then you're losing market share, the sign is there, right? You're just not going to make it much longer, and that's what's happening in our industry, I think.
But I think you've
All
done
right,
a good job of building community too. Like you said, the bike clubs, people my age are looking to go do something. So many of us were trapped inside and lost a lot of those communities. And if you're the place that has those options, people are going to keep showing up. And I think that's what you've really seen, especially my boots on the ground, the people that I went to school with that still live there. I hear about them going to a Hoptown thing all the time. We even had my 10-year high school reunion there a couple of years ago. So I think that's the other part is a lot of these breweries just don't, they're a brewery and that's it. And there's not much else to it.
Well, it's not, it used to be you could build a brewery in the middle of nowhere and people will find you. And that is still the case for the exclusive, most reputable breweries that, are just iconic and you're going to go there, if I don't care where it is. But for us, it's convenience, and it is that beer on the way home. It is, hey, honey, meet me after work, and we get a lot of that. We have a lot of regulars that we see here on a weekly basis, and this has become their hangout. We're told so many times, I don't know what we would do if you weren't here. And the cool thing about our business too, and we reflect on this a lot, is, we had a wedding here. We leased out our brewery for a wedding. We've had celebrations of life, wakes. We've had baby's first birthday. We've had engagement parties. We've had, rehearsal dinners. We had an 80-year-old birthday party, a gentleman 80 years old, not too long ago, and they wanted to have it at Hoptown. But it's funny that the kids will say we want to go to Hoptown because we like Hoptown because we don't go after children in our business, obviously, but that generation that has young kids, they love to come here, and their kids love to come here. But we've covered the gamut in terms of we've had got so many stories. We had a gentleman that came in and lost his wife. Every time he came in, he bought 2 beers, one for him and one for her, and just set it, like a, on display, in her honor. And then he finally met somebody, and they came back to Hoptown to tell Sandy and I. They were so excited because we really, warmed up to them or him, and kind of, we think, help him get through some of the stuff that he was going through. And, they came in, they told us, hey, we got married, we got engaged, we got married, and now they come and they have 2 beers and 2 people. And it's just that kind of stuff. You just can't. You can't buy that kind of loyalty, I think.
So, KT, I'm going to give Scott a chance to say one more thing, but before I do, because that'll kind of wrap it up, what did I not ask him that we need to ask him? This is the least KT's ever gotten to talk on the podcast.
No, I really appreciate it, Scott. I like the episodes when I don't have to do anything. This is the best.
We need to change glasses and see if people can figure out.
Yeah.
No, man, I think it's an amazing story, and it's something that a lot of people want to be able to go do is do something fun like you guys have gotten to do. A lot of people think that it's very boring to start a business, and I think they can listen to your story and see how this little side thing that you were doing out of the pool house really became something so much more. So it's not really a question, just that statement, man.
Yeah, the passion. You see the passion coming.
Well, and the thing that's, for Sandy and I, the thing that's, most important to us is, having customers that want to come back time and time. I said the customers decide if we're successful or not, and our staff. And we're blessed to have a fantastic staff, from our head brewer to our outside sales manager to our tap room manager, our staff. We have a lot of seniority on our staff, and
even
our social media manager. We've just got a solid team, and we're blessed and know that we don't take that for granted.
Even the food truck people, because my buddy's your food truck guy half the time.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, they love us. Yeah, they love us here, definitely.
All right, guys. So Hoptown is in Mooresville, North Carolina. We're just north of Charlotte on Lake Norman. Before KT takes us home, tell the people where they can find some of your beers outside of Hoptown, some of the doors you're in, and the names of those beers, so they can go give it a try if they can't make it here.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Of course, we are, kind of greater Charlotte focused. We have beer at all of the Total Wines in the Charlotte area. We have all the Lowe's Foods in the Charlotte area. All this is, for the most part, is canned product. We sell 4-packs of 16-ounce cans. We do, as I mentioned, way early tap takeovers. So you might go into a Lowe's Foods one day and see 8 of our beers on tap and you can try them, and then you can buy them off the shelf in a 4-pack. You know, our signature beers, and we fortunately, because of our brewer, we've earned a lot of recognition, you know, both locally and internationally and nationally. We have medals across Charlotte area, North Carolina, USA, and international that we've won for our beers. But the primary, like, flagship beers that you would find are Wedding Crasher, which is an IPA, Low Tops, which is a hazy IPA, Sweet Wings, it's a honey wheat ale, On the Nines, which is a light lager. We have a Mexican lager in the marketplace now called Sol Dorado. We have a sour called Disco Kid. We have Dark Made Light, which is a dark lager. So we really do have something for every palate. And then the majority of our customers are, you know, mom and pop type locations. So you'll go into a bar anywhere in Charlotte, there's a good chance you'll see one of our beers on tap. We do have a lot of like Rhino Market, which is a grocery chain in the Charlotte area. We have beers, you know, in cans there, sometimes on draft. But yeah, just you know, if you ever want to find out where we are, you can hit us up on hellohoptown@gmail.com, and we can get back to you same day with where to find our beer within your area of Greater Charlotte. We're in Monroe, we're in Gastonia, we're in, you know, Southern Pines. So we do go outside of the territory a little bit, but I would say our focus is really on Charlotte.
You have no idea that the next week what your business is going to be like. This podcast is going to drop Wednesday morning, dude.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. Yeah,
it's just going to be incredible. I see your sales guy over there. He needs to sit down and rest, because I mean he's going to be busy delivering some stuff.
Well, I'm sure, you know, at the end of this, KT and Kent are going to offer some incredible deal if you visit Hoptowns. I don't know what it is.
What it is, but you're all in for it.
Yeah, maybe a real estate discount. I don't know. No, just kidding.
Yeah, just go to the Hoptown and ask for Kent Temple's tab. That's what I do at least. It normally works.
Well, and important to mention, kind of joking, but we are hello Hoptown is our email at Gmail. We are at Hoptown Beer on Instagram and on Facebook. So look us up. We'd love to have you follow us and take a look at what we're up to. We've always got some funny reel going. We've got our new beer release going. We have a world, you know, a world record winning. What am I trying to say? Social media manager, award winning. Yeah, I got it right. So just check us out. We've got something fun going on all the time.
Awesome.
All right, KT, take us home.
No, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you found this interesting or you learned something, leave us a review. It really does help us out a lot. We'll be back again next Wednesday with another episode. And thank you to the Temple team. You can find us at thetempleteam.com, whether you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. Thanks, Scott.
See ya. Thank you.